The red sun was slowly setting behind the mountains of the frontier world of Narian 7. The small human farming colony was becoming quiet after a long day of work. Farmers were returning home, machines were shutting down, and the cold evening wind moved across the empty fields. But 17-year-old Ethan Carter was still outside. He was carrying a basket of repair tools and walking toward the forest near the colony border. The people of Narian 7 feared that forest. Strange sounds often came from deep inside the trees at night. Hunters spoke about giant shadows moving between the rocks. Some said dangerous beasts lived there, creatures older than the colony itself. Ethan had heard those stories many times, but he never truly believed them. To him, stories were just stories. As Ethan walked along the narrow path, he suddenly heard the sound of running water nearby. Curious, he moved toward the river that crossed the forest edge. That was when he noticed someone standing near the water. It was not a human girl. Her silver hair moved in the wind, and her blue skin reflected the light of the setting sun. She looked scared and completely lost. Ethan stopped for a moment. He had seen aliens before in the trading stations, but never someone like her. Her clothes looked expensive and carried symbols he did not recognize. The girl turned quickly after hearing his footsteps. Fear appeared in her glowing eyes. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke a single word. "I am not going to hurt you," Ethan said slowly. The girl looked surprised by his calm voice. Before she could answer, a loud roar exploded through the forest. Birds flew into the sky and the ground shook beneath their feet. Ethan immediately looked toward the trees. Something large was moving between the shadows. The sound of heavy footsteps grew closer every second. Then it appeared. The creature was bigger than any animal Ethan had ever seen. It had black armor-like skin, glowing red eyes, and claws longer than knives. Sharp teeth filled its mouth as it let out another terrifying roar. The alien girl stepped backward in fear. Her hands were shaking and she could barely move. The beast suddenly charged toward her. Without thinking, Ethan jumped forward and pushed the girl out of the creature's path. The beast crashed into him instead. One massive claw tore across his shoulder, throwing him against a rock. Pain shot through his body, but Ethan forced himself back onto his feet. The creature growled and prepared to attack again. Ethan grabbed a broken branch from the ground and stood between the beast and the girl. His hands were shaking and fear filled his chest, but he refused to move aside. The alien girl stared at him with disbelief. Humans were considered weak by many species in the galaxy, yet this human boy was standing before a monster to protect someone he did not even know. The beast attacked again. Ethan swung the branch with all his strength. It broke instantly against the creature's head. Before he could react, the beast bit deeply into his arm. Ethan screamed in pain as blood covered the ground beneath him. The creature released him and prepared for the final attack. Then the sky itself changed. Bright blue light suddenly appeared above the forest. Massive warships emerged from the clouds like giant metal mountains. Their engines shook the ground and lit the trees below. The beast stopped moving and looked upward in fear. Seconds later, beams of energy struck the ground around it. The creature let out one final roar before disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Ethan collapsed onto the ground. His vision became blurry as the pain spread through his body. The alien girl quickly knelt beside him. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the deep bite wound on his arm. "Why?" she whispered softly. Ethan tried to smile despite the pain. "You looked like you needed help," he answered weakly. Before the girl could speak again, dozens of armored soldiers surrounded them. Their black armor carried the same symbol that was on the girl's clothing. Then the soldiers suddenly stepped aside. A giant figure walked forward. He was over 7 feet tall and wore dark battle armor covered with old scars. His golden eyes scanned the area before stopping on the injured human boy. Every soldier lowered their head as he approached. The alien girl immediately stood up. "Father," she said quietly. Ethan's eyes widened with surprise. The man standing before him was not simply a father. He was one of the most feared warlords in the galaxy, and his daughter had just been saved by a human. The giant warlord stood silently beside the injured human boy. His golden eyes moved from Ethan's wounded arm to his frightened daughter. Around them, the armored soldiers waited without making a sound. The Warlord was known across the galaxy as Lord Varix, the commander of thousands of warships and millions of soldiers. Very few beings had ever dared to stand in his way. Princess Liara quickly stepped forward and looked at her father. She explained everything that had happened in the forest. She told him how the beast had attacked her without warning. She told him how the human boy had pushed her away and taken the attack himself. Most importantly, she told him that Ethan had saved her life without asking for anything in return. Lord Varix looked down at Ethan for several long seconds. He had fought in wars for over 40 years and had met many races across the galaxy. He had seen greed, betrayal, and lies from powerful leaders and trusted allies. But he had never seen someone risk his life for a complete stranger, especially not a human boy from a small farming colony. One of the soldiers stepped closer and scanned Ethan's injuries. The machine suddenly flashed bright red lights. The soldier's expression changed immediately. He quickly looked toward Lord Varix and lowered his head. "My lord, the beast's venom has entered his blood," he reported. "He may only have a few hours left." Princess Liara's face turned pale after hearing those words. She immediately knelt beside Ethan and held his hand. Ethan tried to sit up, but pain spread through his body like fire. His vision became blurry, and his breathing grew heavier. Even then, he forced a small smile onto his face to calm the frightened princess. Lord Varix slowly turned toward his medical officers. "Take him to the flagship immediately," he ordered in a cold voice. The soldiers looked surprised for a moment but quickly obeyed the command. A medical shuttle landed nearby within seconds. Ethan was carefully placed inside as the engines started to roar above the trees. As the shuttle rose into the sky, Ethan looked through the window in disbelief. Massive warships surrounded the planet like silent giants watching from the stars. He had only seen such ships in history books and old military videos. Their metal hulls stretched for kilometers through space. It felt like he had entered another world. Inside the flagship, dozens of alien doctors rushed around the medical room. Advanced machines scanned every part of Ethan's body. Strange symbols appeared across floating screens in the air. The doctors whispered to each other with worried expressions. Finally, one of them walked toward Lord Varix with bad news. "The venom is spreading too quickly," the doctor said quietly. "No treatment in our empire can stop it now." The room became completely silent after those words. Even the soldiers standing near the walls looked shocked. Princess Liara slowly lowered her head as tears formed in her eyes. Lord Varix stared at the medical screen without speaking. Then he asked a question that surprised everyone in the room. "Is there another option?" The doctors looked at each other nervously. Finally, the oldest doctor stepped forward. He hesitated for a moment before answering his ruler. "There is one treatment, my lord," the doctor said carefully. "But it belongs only to the royal bloodline. It has never been given to an outsider before, and it has certainly never been used on a human." The room fell silent once again as everyone waited for the warlord's answer. Princess Liara immediately looked toward her father. She knew exactly what the doctor meant. The royal serum was one of the Empire's greatest secrets. Giving it to another species was forbidden by ancient law. Breaking that law could cause political chaos across the galaxy. Lord Varix slowly closed his eyes and thought about the choice before him. On one side stood the traditions of his people and the laws of his empire. On the other side lay the human boy who had saved his daughter's life without hesitation. For the first time in many years, the great warlord found himself uncertain. Then Ethan's heart monitor suddenly began to sound louder. The doctors rushed toward the bed as warning lights filled the room. Princess Liara stepped back in fear while Lord Varix watched silently. The venom was spreading faster than anyone expected. Time was running out. The oldest doctor looked directly at the warlord. "My lord," he said quietly, "if we do not use the royal serum now, the human boy will die." And every eye in the room turned toward Lord Varix. Lord Varix stood beside Ethan's bed without saying a word. The warning alarms continued to echo through the medical room. Every doctor waited nervously for his decision. The venom was spreading through Ethan's body faster than anyone expected. If nothing was done within minutes, the human boy who saved the princess would be gone forever. Princess Liara stepped closer to her father. Tears were visible in her eyes as she looked at Ethan's pale face. "Father, he saved my life without even knowing who I was," she said softly. "If he had not been there, I would be dead now." For the first time in years, the mighty warlord saw fear in his daughter's eyes. Lord Varric slowly turned toward the doctors. "Prepare the royal serum," he ordered. The entire room froze in shock. Several officers looked at one another in disbelief. One of the doctors immediately stepped forward. "My lord, the council will never accept this decision," he warned carefully. The warlord's expression did not change. "I did not ask for the council's permission," he replied coldly. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room understood the meaning behind those words. The decision had been made. No one aboard the flagship would dare question him again. The doctors quickly moved around the room to prepare the treatment. Inside a silver container rested a glowing blue liquid. It was one of the rarest substances in the Empire. The serum had protected the royal family for generations. Some believed it was older than the Empire itself. Princess Liara watched silently as the doctors connected the serum to Ethan's medical system. The glowing liquid slowly entered his bloodstream. For several seconds, nothing happened. The machines continued making warning sounds. The doctors looked increasingly worried with every passing moment. Then suddenly the screens changed color. The red warning lights disappeared and were replaced by green signals. Ethan's heartbeat slowly became stronger. His breathing became steady once again. One of the doctors quickly checked the readings several times. He looked up at Lord Varric with complete surprise. "The venom is disappearing," the doctor said in disbelief. "The serum is not only stopping it, it is destroying it completely." The room became silent once more. No one had expected the treatment to work so perfectly on a human body. Even the doctors struggled to understand what they were seeing. Hours later, Ethan slowly opened his eyes. Bright lights filled the room above him. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then he saw Princess Liara sitting quietly beside the bed. When she noticed that he was awake, a smile immediately appeared on her face. "You are alive," she said happily. Ethan looked around the room in confusion. "Where am I?" he asked weakly. Before Liara could answer, the large doors opened slowly. Lord Varric entered the room with 2 guards behind him. The soldiers stopped at the entrance while the warlord walked toward the bed. Ethan tried to sit up quickly. He had never seen someone so powerful standing so close before. Lord Varric looked down at him for several seconds. Then, to Ethan's surprise, the feared warlord lowered his head slightly. "You saved my daughter," Lord Varric said. Ethan remained silent, unsure how to respond. The warlord continued speaking in his deep voice. "Among my people, a life saved creates a debt that can never be ignored." Ethan looked confused, while Princess Liara smiled quietly beside him. Lord Varric then placed a small metal device on the table beside the bed. "This is not your reward," he said. "It is only the beginning." Before Ethan could ask what he meant, one of the officers rushed into the room with panic on his face. "My lord," the officer said quickly, "the Galactic Council has learned about the human, and they are demanding that he be handed over immediately." The room became silent after the officer's words. Ethan looked at Lord Varric with confusion. He had never heard of the Galactic Council before, but the expressions on the faces of the soldiers told him everything he needed to know. Whatever was happening, it was serious. "The Council believes the royal serum belongs only to our people," the officer explained. "They say giving it to a human has broken ancient laws." Princess Liara immediately stood up from her chair. Anger appeared on her face for the first time that day. She could not believe they were discussing laws after Ethan had saved her life. Lord Varric remained calm as he listened to the report. He had dealt with the council many times during his long career. He knew they feared change more than anything else. Many powerful leaders believed humans were too young and too weak to deserve respect among the stars. Today's events threatened those beliefs. Only a few hours later, a meeting of the Galactic Council appeared on the giant screen inside the command room. Leaders from many different species stared back at Lord Varric. Some looked angry, while others looked curious. Their eyes quickly moved toward Ethan, who stood quietly beside Princess Liara. One of the council members spoke first. "Lord Varix, explain your actions," he demanded. "The royal serum is sacred. It was never meant for outsiders." Another leader quickly agreed with him. Several members began arguing at once as the room filled with voices. Lord Varix waited until the room became quiet again. Then he stepped forward and looked directly at every leader on the screen. "This human saved my daughter's life while your ships were nowhere to be found," he said firmly. He expected no reward and asked for nothing in return. The council members remained silent. "He stood before death to protect someone he had never met," Lord Varix continued. "Tell me, how many among your worlds would do the same?" The leaders looked at one another, but nobody answered his question. Even the oldest members of the council remained quiet. One leader finally spoke again. "What will you do now?" he asked carefully. Lord Varix looked toward Ethan before answering. "Among my people, a life debt must always be repaid." The room became silent once again. Everyone understood the importance of those words. The warlord was about to make an announcement that could change history. Lord Varix turned toward Ethan and walked closer to him. The young human looked nervous as millions of eyes watched him through the council screens. Princess Liara stood proudly beside him. The warlord raised his hand and spoke in a voice that echoed through the command room. "From this day forward, Ethan Carter is under my personal protection," he announced. A wave of shock moved through the council chamber. "No law, no army, and no government will harm him while I live." The council members immediately began speaking loudly among themselves. Some protested while others looked completely stunned. Personal protection from Lord Varix was a privilege given only to members of the royal family and trusted generals. No human had ever received such an honor before. But Lord Varix was not finished. "As payment for the life he saved," the warlord continued, "I grant Ethan Carter the title of Friend of the Empire." The room became silent once more. Even Ethan looked shocked by what he had just heard. He had no idea what the title meant. Princess Liara smiled as she looked at him. "It means every world in our empire will welcome you as family," she explained softly. Before Ethan could answer, another officer rushed into the room carrying an urgent report. "My lord," the officer said quickly, "we have just received new information about the beast that attacked the princess." Lord Varix narrowed his eyes. The officer took a deep breath before speaking. "It was not a wild attack. Someone sent the beast to kill her." The command room became silent after the officer's report. Ethan looked toward Lord Varix with surprise. Princess Liara's face immediately became serious. If the attack had been planned, then the danger was far greater than anyone had imagined. This was not simply an accident in the forest. The officer placed several images on the main screen. The scans showed hidden control devices inside the beast's body. Someone had captured the creature and turned it into a weapon. The room grew quiet as the evidence appeared before them. There was no longer any doubt about the truth. Lord Varix stared at the images with cold eyes. "Who is responsible?" he asked. The officer lowered his head before answering. "The investigation is still continuing, my lord, but we believe members of the Shadow Alliance are involved." Several officers immediately reached for their weapons after hearing the name. The Shadow Alliance was feared across the galaxy. They operated in secret and often attacked important leaders to create chaos between empires. Princess Liara understood immediately what had happened. Her visit to the colony world had been discovered somehow. The beast had been sent to make sure she never returned home alive. Lord Varix slowly turned toward Ethan. "If you had not been there," the warlord said quietly, "my daughter would not be standing here today." The room fell silent once again. For the first time, Ethan realized how close the galaxy had come to war because of a single attack in the forest. The warlord stepped closer to the young human. "Because of your courage, millions of lives may have been saved," he continued. Ethan looked down at the floor, unsure what to say. He had only acted because someone needed help. He never expected to become involved in the affairs of empires and kings. A few days later, a large ceremony was held aboard the flagship. Officers, commanders, and representatives from many worlds gathered inside the Great Hall. Ethan stood beside Princess Layara while thousands watched from giant screens across the Empire. Even members of the Galactic Council attended the event. Lord Varix walked to the center of the hall and raised his hand for silence. Ethan Carter showed the greatest strength in the universe, and he announced. Not strength of weapons, armies, or power. He showed the strength of courage and sacrifice. The entire hall listened carefully to every word. The Warlord then revealed Ethan's true reward. From this day forward, Ethan Carter becomes the first human guardian of the Empire. Gasps spread throughout the hall. The title had existed for hundreds of years but had never been given to an outsider. Ethan would have access to every world under the Empire's protection. He would travel freely, learn from alien civilizations, and serve as a bridge between humans and the stars. Princess Layara smiled proudly beside him. You saved my life, she said quietly. Now you are part of our family. Ethan looked around the great hall in disbelief. Only a few days earlier, he had been repairing machines on a small farming colony. Now his name was known across entire star systems. News of Ethan's actions spread quickly through the galaxy. Many species who once considered humans weak began to change their opinions. They learned that humans might not have the strongest bodies or the largest fleets, but when someone needed help, humans would stand their ground. Months later, Ethan returned to the same forest on Narion 7. The sun was setting just as it had on the day everything changed. He stood quietly beside the river and looked toward the trees. It was hard to believe that one decision had changed his life forever. Then a familiar voice spoke behind him. Princess Layara smiled as she stepped forward. Ready for your first mission, Guardian? Ethan smiled back as a massive warship appeared in the evening sky above them. His old life had ended, but his adventure among the stars was only beginning.